It is Thursday, December 8th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the Week 14 preview pod. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, Jared Smola. Jared, we got a Thursday night game where the most discussed thing right now is whether and what role Baker Mayfield is going to play 2 days after becoming a member of the Rams. It doesn't really matter for fantasy purposes, but I don't know. I guess it's mildly interesting in real football terms.
Interesting is one word for it. I mean, entertaining might be another word. I mean, I think it matters for how high you rank the Raiders defense. I mean, it's not a good defense. They're already right around 10th in our rankings right now. I think they might move up a little bit if it ends up being Baker Mayfield. I mean, I've never heard of a quarterback playing in a game 2 days after joining a team. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. You're obviously staying away from every part of this Rams passing game, though.
And I mean, this whole Rams offense is the only reason you're considering playing the Raiders defense. It seemed like Seattle should have been a great play on defense against the Rams last week. Didn't end up being great, but they did end up getting home. They got like 9 fantasy points depending on the format. So much sack upside to the Raiders tonight. So if you're wondering what defense to stream and nothing looks good, the Raiders are better than they look. And Baker Mayfield has been bad at allowing sacks. Like he will be playing behind a bad offensive line if he's playing. He's bad at holding the ball for too long and creating more sacks than what the offensive line's already doing. So yeah, good spot. It is Las Vegas at the Rams on Thursday night. Raiders by 6 on the road, over under 44.5 in this game. Josh Jacobs questionable again with that calf injury. So that can only mean, Jared, that he's set up for big usage and another set of monster numbers.
Exactly. He has a quad on the injury report now, too. But Tom Pelissero already said this morning that he's going to play tonight. You're starting Josh Jacobs. You're obviously starting Devontae Adams. They've been two of the best players in fantasy football all season. I think the fringy guys on the Raiders side. Well, I guess first let's start with Derek Carr, who I think is a pretty solid play tonight. He's just been better lately. I think he struggled getting comfortable in Josh McDaniels' offense early on this season. Just 232 yards per game. On 6.8 yards per attempt over his first 7 games of this season, 272 yards per game on 7.7 yards per attempt over his last 5. He has 11 passing touchdowns over his last 5 games. No Aaron Donald tonight again for the Rams. Last week, their first game without Donald, 21st in overall defensive DVOA, also 21st in pass defense DVOA. So it's a good matchup for Carr tonight. The only downside I see is that, this is just kind of a game that's over by halftime. He doesn't have to do a whole lot, but I do think he's a pretty decent week 14 streamer.
Yeah, you said solid at first. That's the word I have next to him in my notes. He's 11th in our QB rankings, so he's somebody you can use. Not somebody that's likely to have a huge game, but there's plenty of upside. I would go ahead and start him over Trevor Lawrence, who we're waiting to see on the injury status of. I would start Derek Carr also over Kirk Cousins, Deshaun Watson, Tyler Huntley, Mike White, Tom Brady, among other guys that you might be considering, I think.
Yep, me too.
And elsewhere among Raiders, you started talking about fringy plays. Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow seem like they're nearing returning, but it looks like they're on track for next week against the Patriots. Obviously, we'll have to watch them for that one, but that neither is currently active makes Mac Hollins still in play. Yep. It means that we have to mention Foster Moreau's name, although he's even still outside the top 12 tight ends in a week where 6 teams are on bye.
Yeah, Hollins has been the better target bet among these two guys over the past 4 weeks without Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller. 21% target share for Hollins in those past 4 games, 7.3 targets per game. So he's okay. Again, I don't think it's a game where you're going to see the Raiders have to throw it more than 30, 35 times. So I don't think you get huge volume out of Mac Hollins. But and then Foster Moreau, the route rates have kind of been where we want them, but just 4.3 targets over his last 4 games. The Rams have been pretty solid in tight end coverage. So, relatively speaking, I think Hollins is a better play among these two guys tonight.
Yeah, neither are guys that you want to run out and grab to make sure you play him. Foster Moreau, I wouldn't even bother picking him up to start over Tyler Higbee if that's who I have. We saw a weak 54% route rate from Higbee last week. Moreau is ahead of Higbee in our rankings this week, but Higbee did still tie for the team target lead last week, got a 20% target share. So, I'm not saying that Higbee's better than Foster Moreau. I'm just saying I don't think that you're really upgrading there.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't know. I'd probably make the move for Moreau at this point of the year when you're just kind of playing week to week. But yeah, there's not a big gap between them.
On the Rams side, beyond Tyler Higbee, Cam Akers becomes a question after scoring 2 rushing touchdowns last week. I think that if you need a Rams running back, I would play Cam Akers over Kyron Williams. But I mean, we have to remember that the week before Cam Akers scored twice, it was Kyron Williams playing more than Cam Akers and a lot more than Cam Akers in that game. So we can't say for sure that Cam Akers is the guy. We can say for sure that this backfield has been terrible this year. And I would say that probably the only reason Cam Akers scored twice is because they were playing a Seattle defense that's been pretty generous to the run.
Yeah, terrible backfield all season, unpredictable all season. Only twice all year have the Rams had the same running back lead in touches in back-to-back weeks. It was Cam Akers back in weeks 2 and 3, and then Darrell Henderson in weeks 9 and 10. Other than that, it's been flip-flopping every week. Now, to me, it makes sense. I mean, it's still Cam Akers versus Kyron Williams. Like, I know Akers has had a disappointing season, and who knows if he'll ever be the same guy after the Achilles, but like, it makes sense that he's going to be this team's lead back. So, like you said, he's obviously the guy to bet on tonight if you have to play one of these backs. The Raiders are dead last in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running back, so the matchup's good. I think the Rams are going to try to run it as much as possible for as long as they can, regardless of who's under center. So, like, you know, again, Akers sits in RB3 territory in our rankings this week. That's largely because there's 6 teams on bye. So he's not a guy I'd be wanting to play, but you know, I think he's okay if you need to go to him.
Yeah, RB 28 specifically in PPR. So, you know, that's in range for plenty of fantasy teams, but it's not somebody to get excited about. Anything else from that game?
Nope.
All right. Jacksonville at Tennessee. Titans by 4 in this one. Over under 41. And we're going to have to play a little wait and see here because Trevor Lawrence has that foot injury. You know, it looked like a bad knee injury at the time against Detroit. It turns out that there was more damage to the foot/toe area. The knee has checked out. And Doug Peterson said Wednesday, we'll have to see. He doesn't really know yet about Trevor Lawrence for the weekend. He would certainly not be the first quarterback this season to come back and play after an injury and then miss the next game. So, you know, it's really going to have to be something that we watch through the week. And it's tempting to say, well, let's just forget about him because Trevor Lawrence let us down last week against Detroit. This Tennessee defense has not been great against the pass, but it's been okay overall as a defense. Trevor Lawrence, though, probably wasn't quite as bad as the numbers say last week. He was coming into that game off of 3 good performances. Last week, he finished 23rd in the league in completion rate, but 12th in Pro Football Focus's adjusted completion rate, which takes into account drops, accounts for throwaways. So, you know, it still wasn't a great week for Lawrence, but it's not like he went from 3 really good games to, oh, crap, there's the old Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, 18th in PFF passing grades last week. I thought he played okay. The Jags had 4 drops, 3 by Zay Jones, 1 by Evan Ingram, obviously costing Lawrence yards and also probably costing, you know, those drives getting extended and potential for more fantasy points. So again, yeah, I'm with you. He wasn't as bad as the box score would make it look. The concerns this week, obviously the toe foot injury probably limits the rushing upside on Lawrence, which has been a big part of his game lately. He has 25 rushing yards per game over his last 5. The other thing too is the Jags have an 18.75 point implied total. It's the 6th lowest on the week. So you can pass on Tennessee. It's a pass funnel defense. You know, the Jags probably aren't going to have success running the ball. They're not going to probably try to run a whole lot. So volume should be on Lawrence's side. He has a wide range of outcomes, I think, as he has all season. With the injury, he's a guy I would try not to use this week. Like I would use Derek Carr tonight over Lawrence for sure if I was making that decision right now.
Yeah, I think the injury question, even if he plays, gives a bit more downside risk than there is ceiling potential to Lawrence this week.
For sure.
Elsewhere among Jaguars, I think Christian Kirk is still an easy start, really, no matter who's at quarterback for the Jaguars. Zay Jones, 30th in our PPR rankings. He followed maybe the best game of his entire career with probably one of his worst, 3 drops, as you mentioned, against Detroit. That gives him just 4 on the year, though. So it's not like he has displayed a drop problem. He had a drop problem against Detroit. And we're going to talk about the Lions defense a little bit more later when we get to that game. This week, though, Titans are the best scoring matchup for wide receivers. So I would certainly assume that it's better for Zay Jones if Trevor Lawrence is playing, but he looks like a decent wide receiver 3 either way.
Yeah, Zay Jones still got 7 targets last week. He has 7+ targets in 7 of his 11 games this season. So, you know, in that wide receiver 3 range, he is a pretty safe bet for volume. And again, this should be a pass heavier game plan from Jacksonville, at least as long as Lawrence is able to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tennessee has seen the league's highest pass rate over expected all season. The Jaguars have passed at the 6th highest rate over expected over the past 4 weeks, according to the free article from Timmy Hernandez you can read on draftsharks.com right now. Travis Etienne, I am wary of this week. The Jags have showed us that they're not going to force the run. Maybe that's different if it's CJ Beathard in place of Trevor Lawrence this week, but we know how bad this matchup is against Tennessee. And just to put a little different context on it than straight fantasy points, we've had 9 running backs reach double-digit PPR points against the Titans this year. Miles Sanders was the first guy in that group to do so without reaching 5 targets. He, of course, did run for a touchdown, only rushed 10 times. So that was the Eagles not forcing the run against Tennessee last week. The average in targets for that group of 9 running backs is 6.2 per game. Only one guy besides Miles Sanders fell short of 6 targets, and that guy had 5 targets. Travis Etienne, meanwhile, has seen 3.1 targets per game for the season in his full games. He has reached 5 just twice and never gone beyond that number. So I don't like the ceiling potential for sure for Etienne, and I think that there's risk to the point that I'm not scared to sit him versus several other guys in the range that we'll get to throughout the show.
Yeah, again, it's tough at running back, especially with 6 teams. Like, to me, the matchup's definitely brutal. No argument there. To me, it knocks Etienne from an RB1 to an RB2. He played 88% of the Jags' offensive snaps last week. Got 16 of the 17 running back opportunities. JaMychal Hasty went away last week. I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but again, Etienne, that's a rare running back usage, and if he gets that again, I think he'll be okay, even in spite of the bad matchup. Again, don't like him. Definitely downgrade him because of the matchup, but he's like 15th in our rankings or so. Like, you'd have to be stacked your running back to sit him this week.
Well, to me, it's splitting hairs at some point, but to me, the usage is what puts him inside the top 18 for this matchup, as opposed to, I guess less specifically what knocks him out of the top 12. Like, specifically in that range, I think Isaiah Pacheco is somebody who people will really realistically be weighing against Travis Etienne this week. And I would rather chase the upside of Isaiah Pacheco this week.
Yeah, I don't think I'd argue with more upside for Pacheco. I just like Etienne's role better. Pacheco still just isn't doing much in the passing game, which I think hurts the floor case.
On the Titans side of this matchup, there's not a whole lot to talk about this offense at this point. I'm primarily watching for any turnaround from Derrick Henry. He's had 4 straight down weeks against average to poor run defenses. Jacksonville comes in higher in DVOA than any of those past 4 defenses against the run. So, I mean, we kind of have to play Derrick Henry just because he's Derrick Henry, and it's not likely that you have 2 more attractive options right now. But I really need some kind of rebound, especially with the Chargers and Texans up next. That should just be smash matchups for him.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, the matchups are so good. I don't think you're going to be benching Henry regardless of what he does in this game. But yeah, I mean, you said down weeks. Like, we're talking really down weeks. He hasn't topped 3.1 yards per carry in any of his last 4 games. And it's been on Henry too. You look at the PFF grades, 36th among 43 running backs in PFF rushing grades over the last 4 weeks, 28th among those 43 in elusive rating. This is when he kind of starts to get going usually too. And he seems to be slowing down. Now, he's still getting nice volume. I mean, not massive volume, not like 25 carries, but he's been getting, 19, 20, 21 carries during this last 4-game stretch. Still getting some work in the passing game too. 2.8 targets, 2.3 catches per game over the last 4. So again, you're not sitting Derrick Henry, and this is a matchup that could get him going again. The Titans are favorites. I think that's important for Henry. You want the positive game script, but it would certainly be nice to see him have a more efficient game.
Now, of course, we say generally you're not sitting Derrick Henry because in most cases, most teams are not going to have 2 guys that are above him. But, make sure you check the rankings, check your team intel page on draftsharks.com, because I'm sure there are some teams out there where you actually could have a couple of guys like, Josh Jacobs was getting drafted well behind starter range. So if you have Josh Jacobs plus another early round running back, quite possible that Derrick Henry is your 3rd running back this week. Looking at Football Outsiders numbers, he's just 21st in DER for the season on rushing. He is 25th in rushing DVOA, below average performance in that. He is 29th among running backs in success rate, which measures how often a running back gets what is needed on a particular play in a particular situation. So it's going poorly right now by multiple measures. Most cases you're not sitting him, but there might be some cases where you do.
Maybe the freakazoid has finally hit the wall.
Yeah.
Finally.
It's got to happen at some point. Anything else worth discussing on the Tennessee side?
Actually, kind of quite a bit. I want to talk about the passing game in general, because another thing we've seen over the past 4 games as Henry has slowed down is a shift towards the pass for Tennessee. They've basically been a neutral offense in terms of run pass split over these last 4 games. They're 16th in pass rate over expected over the last 4 weeks, 30th on the season. So there's definitely been a shift. And this is a matchup against Jacksonville. We talked about it last week. They've been really bad against the pass lately, 31st in Football Outsiders DVOA over the last 5 weeks, 11th against the run. So they've still been decent against the run. So maybe we see even more of a shift towards the pass in this game. I think that makes Ryan Tannehill an okay streamer. I mean, I prefer, definitely Carr over him. I'd probably even roll with Lawrence over Tannehill in this game, depending on, what we hear about Lawrence over the next couple days. I think these tight ends are worth talking about, though, because, man, if you've looked at the tight end landscape this week, like, it's always bad. It's, like, super horrible this week with the six teams on bye. So I think Chico Okonkwo and Austin Hooper are in play. Hooper seems like the safer floor bet to me. He's averaging 5 targets per game over his last 4, 16% target share. Then Chico Okonkwo, he's seen 5 targets in 2 straight games now. Season high route rate last week, 56%. Then we should also mention, too, that Treylon Burks is probably going to miss this game with his concussion. So that opens up some targets for these tight ends. So, both these tight ends, to me, are in play as streamers this week because it's such a bad tight end week.
Yeah, certainly if you are looking down in lower ranges for an answer at quarterback, for an answer at tight end, even Robert Woods at wide receiver, they all make sense. The downside of them passing more is like, oh, okay, so that makes them maybe relevant as opposed to, intriguing guys, even in this 6-team bye this week.
Yeah, you're not going to get 40 passes. You might get 30.
Mm-hmm. Philadelphia at the Giants, Eagles by 7, over under 44.5. Philly side is easy. You play absolutely everything in this game against the Giants. It's the final game that Dallas Goedert must miss on IR. It sounds like he's trending toward returning for week 15. So he's a good guy to pick up now if you can.
For sure. Yeah. My hopes and dreams in the fantasy playoffs depend on Dallas Goedert getting back. So hopefully he's able to. I think Miles Sanders is someone you might be wondering about just because he's been on a bit of a cold stretch. I think 3 of his last 4 games haven't been great. But this is a good spot for him. We've seen the Eagles just adjust their game plans based on opponent all season. Like, they went pass heavy last week as they should have against the Titans. I think this is a game they could go run heavier again. So I think Sanders is a good volume bet, a good touchdown bet.
And that's the thing about Miles Sanders. I mean, you mentioned that he's been cold lately, but I would counter that, or at least say that reality is a little bit different than that, because he had 12 carries against Washington, which we know is a tough run defense. He ran pretty well, 4.5 yards per carry in that one, but obviously limited production on limited volume. 13 carries against the Colts, again, a defense that's tougher against the run, 47 yards in that game. Then a huge one against the Packers, who are a bad run defense, and then muted opportunity and production again against Tennessee, which plays the run tough, plays the pass poorly. We saw them lean pass and do it well last week. So it's just a Philly offense now that's capable of doing what it needs to do in a specific game setup. This week, nothing scary about the Giants, either in pass or run defense. So the Eagles should be able to do, whatever they feel like doing on offense. That has generally included plenty of running. We've seen 15 plus carries from Miles Sanders more often than we haven't this season. So yeah, he's got lots of upside to him this week. And, it's you could see it reflected in our rankings. You were probably looking at him last week like, I don't know, can I really sit Miles Sanders after what he did to the Packers? Then he had the 10 carries against Tennessee. So just be willing to swing back and forth for the different situations for them.
Yep, and he's a good starter in season long. I think he's going to be a nice tournament play in DFS this week.
On the Giants side, Saquon Barkley reminded us the last 2 weeks why we play him through struggles, disappointing yardage in 3 straight games for him, but touchdowns in 2 of those, 9 receptions over the past 2. So you're going to go ahead and play him. It's kind of similar to Derrick Henry in that he's not giving us the yardage we need from a stud running back, but he's still ultimately not killing us with what he's doing.
Yeah, the usage was back up again last week, too, for Saquon. 88% of the snaps, 23 opportunities. Those were his most opportunities since week 10. The Eagles did get Jordan Davis back last week, their run stuffer. He only played 6 snaps, but the Eagles also got their best Football Outsiders run defense DVOA mark of the entire season. And they have sort of been trending back up. So I don't think it's as good of a matchup for Saquon as it was like a month ago. But you're still starting him because he's still one of the best volume bets at the position.
And Darius Slayton is the other guy most worth talking about. I think we'll have one more guy that we really talk about, but Darius Slayton has topped 60 receiving yards in 5 straight games now. He's been 70% playing time or more every game since week 8. In that span, wide receiver 22 in PPR scoring, despite only scoring 1 touchdown, 32nd among wide receivers in target share. So the floor dips a little bit, although that's still in wide receiver 3 range. 18.2 yards per catch is the big selling point with him and how he is putting up his numbers.
Yeah, I think he's a nice guy to have on your roster as a wide receiver 3 going forward. This is a bad matchup for Slayton. The Eagles tough against wide receivers in general. They're 4th in adjusted points allowed to position. They're especially tough against outside receivers. That's Slayton. They're also especially tough against deep passes. They are the best defense against deep passes according to Football Outsiders, and that's where Slayton has gotten a lot of his value lately. He seems to be hitting a big play every week. So he's lower in our rankings this week than he will be for most of the rest of the season, but I think he's still an okay wide receiver 3.
Mm-hmm. Daniel Jones, I wanted to skip over, and then I looked at his fantasy numbers, and it wouldn't be comfortable to play Daniel Jones this week, but he's got 20 plus fantasy points in 3 of his past 4 games now. He's also scored 17 plus in 3 straight meetings with the Eagles. Obviously, none of those have come this season, so I'm not sure how much of a bearing it has on this matchup, but he's at least somebody that can be usable, kind of in the Ryan Tannehill range.
Yeah. You're going to need to get it from his legs, I think. I don't expect a big passing game from Jones here. He did match a season high with 7 designed runs last week. So he continues to provide that. I'd go Tannehill over Daniel Jones if making that decision, but I think they're in the same bucket.
I'd go puke in that bucket if making that decision.
Yeah, me too.
Anybody else from that game?
We got to talk about these crappy tight ends this week, because I think a lot
so.
of people are going to be needing to make these decisions. I think Daniel Bellinger is in the same tier as Austin Hooper and Chico Okonkwo. 83% of their outs in his return from that eye injury last week. 5 targets in that game. He's averaging 4.2 targets per game over his last 5 healthy games. So, not exciting, but someone who can get you like 5-6 points if you need it.
Yeah, I think that I would honestly lean Daniel Bellinger over either Titans tight end because it's one guy versus 2, and he's somebody that you can have as that decent target bet the rest of the way.
Yeah, to me, Bellinger and Hooper are like the same guy. Chico Okonkwo is like the upside play. I think he has just because of his big playability, he has the potential to actually, give you a big-ish score.
Mm-hmm. New York Jets at Buffalo Bills this week. Bills by 9.5 over under 44. It's Mike White and it's Zonovan Knight, who are the 2 guys for the Jets that I think you really need to figure out this week. The Bills defense hasn't been as good against the pass lately as it was early in the year. Had its worst game of the season against the Browns in Detroit a few weeks back, but it's still been solid to good around that, and certainly better than either the Bears or Vikings defenses that Mike White faced the past 2 weeks. So it's tough to just like completely push aside a guy who has thrown for more than 300 yards in his only 2 starts this year. But it's also worth noting that even in those 2 games, Mike White sits just 17th in Pro Football Focus passing grade over those past 2 weeks.
He threw 57 passes last week. He wasn't very good. 54% completion rate, 6.5 yards per attempt, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He made some nice throws late in the game, but overall, it was not a strong game, and this is definitely his toughest test yet. So to me, White isn't really a quarterback 1 option. Like I would play Tannehill and Daniel Jones over Mike White. I think he's a fine quarterback 2.
What about Mike White versus Tyler Huntley?
Huntley.
Yeah, I like that's where it gets uncomfortable because we're talking about 2 guys with limited samples to draw from, but I think Huntley has a higher floor because of the rushing, and I don't think you'll lose anything on ceiling from Huntley to Mike White either. Agreed.
White's blow-up game last year, too, came against the Bills. And like you said, that Bills defense was better than this current version, but maybe some bad vibes from Mike White going into this game.
The backfield, meanwhile, Michael Carter not only returned to practice Wednesday, he's off the injury report completely. So it sounds like he should be good to go for Sunday. Robert Saleh said of Zonovan Knight, he's not going anywhere. Now, I don't think any of us was assuming that Zonovan Knight was going to disappear with Michael Carter back. The question is, what's the touch split going to look like? We got Zonovan Knight controlling things last week, but that was obviously with Carter out with limited guys in the backfield with him. The week before, we had 14 carries for Knight, 3 targets. versus 11 carries and 4 targets combined for Michael Carter and Ty Johnson. And it was Carter leading by a carry and a target at halftime before leaving with his injury shortly after.
Right. It was at halftime of that game, it was 6 carries and 2 targets for Carter, 4 carries, 1 target for Knight. I don't know if Knight's play over the past couple of weeks has changed what that split's going to look. I honestly, it's tough to know how this is going to work. I think it's safe to say Carter and Knight will both be involved. Ty Johnson might remain involved. I don't know. I'm assuming James Robinson's going to be healthy scratched again, but we'll see. I mean, there's going to be 3 running backs active and potentially 3 running backs involved. It's not a great matchup. Jets, road underdogs with a low implied total. It's not a great spot. I would say, Mike White has continued to target running backs at an above average rate. So that helps both of these guys. Again, we don't know who's going to get the passing down work. I think it's probably going to be split. We still have Knight higher in our rankings right now, but both Knight and Carter are in RB3 range.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked to see it go either way between those two guys. The Bills have been softer against the run as the season's worn on, so there is some rushing upside there. If the game can stay close, if it can stay closer than the Vegas line says that it will. I think that Knight has played well enough the past couple weeks to at least say that I doubt Ty Johnson remains a strong factor in this game and that it's primarily a split between Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight. But again, I couldn't say for sure which between Carter and Knight outscores the other this week.
Yeah, I mean, the concern with Johnson is if he continues to play in obvious passing situations, which I think is possible.
Yeah, I think that should be Carter this week, though. If it's not, bam.
I agree.
And then Garrett Wilson, is worth mentioning just so that we can say Garrett Wilson. He's inside the top 24. We've got neither running back inside the top 24 right now, but Garrett Wilson is certainly up there. It would be hard for me to not play him on most teams at this point. Corey Davis, though, don't buy last week's stuff, which was inflated by that passing volume.
Yeah, agreed. Garrett Wilson had a nice game against Buffalo back in week 9 with Zach Wilson under center. So, he's an obvious starter. Elijah Moore, 74% route rate last week. He's at least back to a full-time player almost. I mean, you're not using him. You're probably not using him the rest of the season, but we'll see where it goes.
He also apparently doesn't know how to drag that second foot.
I know. That would have been sweet.
On the Bills side of this one, it's really a similar deal in the backfield to the Jets. There's upside, but I don't know who's going to be the leader between James Cook and Devin Singletary. Cook was the flashy one last week. We still got a rushing score from Singletary, and he still edged James Cook in playing time.
Right. It was I think Singletary played one more snap than Cook. Cook ran one more pass route than Singletary. I don't know how carries are going to be split. I think Cook is the better bet for targets. Just because, as we talked about, Singletary just hasn't been good in the passing game. He's done it on volume, but efficiency-wise, he has not been good. I think Cook's better there. So that's why I prefer Cook among those two, because I think he's going to get, he's a better bet for targets. The issue here, too, though, is Naheem Hines. He didn't get a ton of touches, but his snap rate was way up last week, too. He played 31% of the snaps. So playing time-wise, it was a 3-man committee. That's what kind of makes Cook and Singletary shaky fantasy plays.
Yeah, I agree that if I'm deciding between them, I'm going Cook. I think that you just make sure you don't overtrust any of them this week, especially Cook, because we've got really one game to go on.
Yep.
Gabe Davis, 5 targets, 2 catches, 33 yards in the first meeting with the Jets. His target share has been up lately. It's slightly over 20% over the past 4 games. So that makes him a little bit better bet than he was previously. This is the worst scoring matchup for wide receivers by our adjusted fantasy points allowed, though. It's also the 4th worst for quarterbacks. So, not an awesome situation for Gabe Davis.
Yeah, and Gabe is probably going to see the most of Sauce Gardner. What the Bills did smartly in the first meeting against the Jets is they moved Steph Diggs inside to the slot for 43% of his snaps, which was his highest of the season. And that, worked as far as Diggs goes. He had a nice game, and I would expect the Bills to have a similar game plan here. That's bad news for Gabe, who's going to kind of, just be on Sauce Island. And I would not expect this to be a spike week from Gabe Davis.
Sauce Island sounds like an awesome barbecue place, though.
Great.
Anything else in that game?
No, I think Isaiah McKenzie and Dawson Knox are the fringe guys in the Bills. And in this matchup where we don't expect it to be a big game for the Bills offense, I would not want to use either guy.
I agree. Although Dawson Knox is close to must-start status at tight end, where we're talking about Chigakonkwo and Daniel Bellinger.
Yeah, that's true.
Baltimore at Pittsburgh, Steelers by 2.5, over under of you don't want to watch this game. We've got no Lamar Jackson on the Baltimore side. So it's Tyler Huntley. He's got 6 starter level appearances in the NFL over the past 2 years. I say starter level because a couple of them have been where he has replaced Lamar Jackson early in a game, but still played really a starter level of snaps. Here are his fantasy finishes: QB 18, QB 15, QB 1, QB 21, QB 29, QB 16. So I think that Packers game is still doing a little bit of clouding Tyler Huntley for fantasy players in general. It's as long as you are thinking of him as like QB 16, that's where he should be. There's the upside that he, runs an extra play into the end zone at any point, but he's not that QB1 overall upside guy that he was in that one game against the Packers.
Yeah, he's a pretty good rushing back. He's not Lamar Jackson as a runner, and the Ravens don't use him that way. If you look at the designed runs called for Huntley, it's been around like 4 or 5 per game in his starts, whereas Lamar, like this year, for example, has been at 8.3 designed carries per game. So he's not going to get as much of that work. I think he projects for like 40 to 50 rushing yards. Then the passing projection, like you can't be excited about it. Lamar Jackson wasn't even putting up big passing numbers. Lamar has been a low-end quarterback 1 for the past like 2 months now. So I think you can't expect Huntley even get to that level. I really think he's a nice quarterback too. I know some teams might need to use him as a quarterback 1 this week because of the bye weeks, but Derek Carr, I'd play over Huntley easily. Jared Goff, I'd play over Huntley easily. I'd even play Kirk Cousins over Huntley easily in that Lions Vikings game.
Yeah, I mean, low-end QB1 is even friendly to the way that Lamar Jackson's been putting up numbers. We've had under 200 passing yards for Tyler Huntley in 5 of his 6 starter-level appearances. We have had 40-plus rushing yards in every single one. So that's the floor. That's what you like, especially in the range where we're looking at quarterback. He's basically Daniel Jones with less passing upside, it looks like.
Yeah, and as you said, tough matchup, bad game environment. Like, I don't think you're going to get any ceiling outings from this game.
Yeah, so not exciting. Also, not an exciting backfield to try to play. It's a backfield to try to avoid after Kenyon Drake worked ahead of Gus Edwards last week. The other factor besides the crowded RB depth chart here is that Baltimore leads the league in the highest carry share for quarterbacks. You just mentioned how they run it more with Lamar Jackson when he's in there, but they still do run it plenty with Tyler Huntley as well. 10 carries for him last week. Overall, 33% of Ravens rushing attempts go to quarterbacks. So, that just shrinks the pie that's being shared by too many backs here. I don't think it's scary to sit any particular person. I would rather not play any Ravens running backs. I would play, James Cook. I would play probably either Jet over any of these guys.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I guess shouldn't have been so confident in Edwards leading the backfield last week. I was. He did not. Kenny Drake played more snaps. He had more carries, had more targets. J.K. Dobbins might be back at some point too, which would obviously, make this a backfield easier to avoid.
I mean, I don't think we were overconfident. Everything we'd seen, which was a limited sample, and I guess that's the takeaway is make sure that you realize even if it's both of the games where we saw Gus Edwards healthy, he was the backfield leader. That's still just 2 games.
Yeah, it seems like a true, hot hand situation where Harbaugh's just going to ride whichever back is having more success in that given game.
Yeah, which certainly makes sense for them. And I think it'll be that way the rest of the season, even after J.K. Dobbins returns. On the Pittsburgh side, Najee Harris, no practice Wednesday. It looks like he's managing that oblique injury because he didn't practice, and then came back in full on Friday and was off the injury report. So it doesn't seem like we should worry about his status here. His playing time was in the normal range at Atlanta, 66% snap share, 71% of Pittsburgh running back carries. So he's a solid starter this week.
Yeah, got the 17 carries last week. Didn't do much in the passing game, though. Finished with just 1 target, which is especially troublesome in this match because Baltimore's first in Football Outsiders run defense DVOA over the past 5 weeks. They're 9th in adjusted points allowed to running backs on the season. So, not a good matchup for Najee, especially if he's not going to do much in the passing game.
Yeah, as we talk about it, I was talking about Travis Etienne in that range. Maybe Najee Harris is the one that I would drop even further because he's even a worse bet for receiving than Travis Etienne at this point. So I would play Isaiah Pacheco over him as well. Then we're getting down to like the splits in Tampa Bay, Miami, Houston. So, at that point, it becomes kind of a coin flip because you're talking about touchdown luck, but it's certainly not an upside matchup or really a high upside role for Najee Harris at this point.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think we're too high on Harris's receiving projection right now, so we will bump that down after this.
All right. Elsewhere in the Pittsburgh pass offense, we got Deontay Johnson limited Wednesday with a hip issue. We'll watch him through the week and see if he's ready. Then we've got George Pickens, who is basically Pittsburgh's version of Gabe Davis with a much worse quarterback and a much worse offense.
Yeah, 4.5 targets per game for Pickens over his last 4 now. Now he did, come out and say he's pissed off with his role this week, so maybe he gets some squeaky wheel treatment. He should, honestly.
Big for your britches there, rookie.
He should be getting the ball more. I mean, look at any number. He's been the better receiver than Deontay Johnson this season. But I think both these guys are like low-end wide receiver 3s, and that's just because there are 6 teams on bye this week.
I agree that he should be pissed about his role. I also think that telling the media that as a rookie is not the way to endear yourself to Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, that's the type of dude George Pickens is. I think he's going to have a lot more of these issues throughout his career, but he's definitely still a talent I want to bet on. But again, it's tough to like him with the lack of targets he's been seeing lately.
Yeah, and I'm not betting significantly on him in his current scenario, but if you're looking down in that range, he's okay. If it's George Pickens or Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I'm not going to argue with you playing George Pickens.
Yes.
Anything else from that game?
Nope. I mean, you're starting Pat Fryermuth. His usage has been down the past couple of games as Pittsburgh's gone run heavy. But he's still like 5th among tight ends in our rankings this week, just because.
Yeah, he's got light coming off him based on the current tight end scenario.
Yes, for sure.
Minnesota at Detroit, Lions by 2.5. This opened at Vikings by 2.5, and you would think, based on the Vikings' lead in the division and the fact that they could clinch the division this week, you would think that they would be the favorite in this one, but they're not. And I think that that's a nod to Detroit actually playing better lately, and it's been on both offense and defense. The over-under here is 52.5, so it's also a more significant fantasy matchup than we probably would have assumed at the beginning of the season. Let's start, though, with injury, which, again, includes DeAndre Swift. He was limited Wednesday with the ankle, and they listed it as an ankle, not rest. So that's significant because last week, DeAndre Swift was off the injury report completely.
Yeah. I was very disappointed to see that yesterday. Because I felt good about Swift as like an upside RB2 play this week. Highest snap rate since week 8. Last week at 51%, 14 carries, his most since week 1. Like they clearly expanded his role. And you got to believe it was because he was off the injury report. Now we'll see what he does over the next couple of days. Like if he's full these next 2 days, like I'll still feel good about him. If he's limited, questionable, he's probably going to, slide back to, low end RB2, RB3 range.
Yeah. I mean, it's, we're at the point of the year where a limited practice isn't even necessarily a bad thing for a player's status, but it is absolutely worth watching for Swift because Detroit has showed us that they're going to protect him if they're worried about any of his physical stuff. And, when they do ramp up his work and then his body's like, I need a rest on Wednesday, it's not a good sign.
Yeah. I mean, the Lions are still in the mix for a playoff spot. So, they're not at the point where they're going to be resting guys just because their season's over.
Mm-hmm. But they will take care of somebody who they don't want to injure long-term. It's also worth noting there were a bunch of Lions that missed practice yesterday. Starting safety missed practice. One of their starting corners was out. Center Frank Ragnow was out. He hasn't missed a snap since week 2. He played through a foot issue last week, was limited Wednesday and Thursday before a full practice Friday. So we'll see if that was kind of a rest day for him or if he is in question for this week. Left tackle Taylor Decker was also out for Wednesday's practice with an elbow issue. He hasn't missed a snap all season. So, I'll have to watch both of those O-linemen because this is a team that is led by its O-line.
Yeah, I remember saying last week the Lions offense has finally gotten healthy, and it's not quite the case this week. We'll see how it goes over the next few days. I think, the O-line injuries matter for Jared Goff too, who I think is probably the best streamer option at quarterback this week. He's been playing well. As we've said, the issue is Jamal Williams had been stealing all the touchdowns. Goff got 2 touchdowns last week, and the result was a pretty nice fantasy outing. The Vikings have not been good against the pass, especially lately, and the Lions have the 3rd highest implied total this week at 27.5 points. So that's another mark in Goff's favor.
What a crazy world we're in this week, Jared. I mean, Jared Goff, dare I say, a good option at quarterback this week. It feels strange, but as you said, he's been playing well. 4 straight games without a turnover. He's got 1 interception among his past 6. He's only taken 7 total sacks over the past 6 games. So again, we'll be watching that O-line. We'll be watching Swift to a lesser degree. But the Lions have also been playing better. They have passed over the expected rate over the past 4 weeks. So we've got lots of Jamal Williams vulture touchdowns, but the Lions have been willing to throw the ball. We've also seen Vikings opponents being willing to throw the ball. They're passing over the expected rate for the season, even higher over the past 4 weeks. So, I mean, this could just be full on shootout conditions.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the pass rate stuff because I was looking into that, the pass rate over expected numbers. And Detroit was basically neutral the previous 3 weeks. Last week, they were plus 12% pass rate over expected against the Jags, who are, this pass funnel defense that we talked about. Minnesota's a pass funnel too. So you could see a pass leaning game plan from Detroit again.
And that was in a game they dominated. So it wasn't like they needed it to score points. Yep. So they just kept pumping. It certainly doesn't hurt either that the offense is healthier, as you mentioned, even with the issues we talked about. We do have Swift at least, back. We've got DJ Chark back healthy. We've got Jameson Williams starting to get involved, which I don't think that Jameson Williams is going to be a fantasy factor on his own where we're starting him at wide receiver this season, but getting his speed on the field can only help the passing game in general.
Yeah, Jameson Williams played 8 snaps last week, so you obviously can't start him this week, and it's tough to imagine getting to a point where he's trustable. You only have 4 weeks of the fantasy season left. I do think DJ Chark's in play this week. The target shares still haven't been great, but he's getting the downfield look. So if he hits, one of those, you have a nice fantasy day. The Vikings are 29th in adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. It's just a game in general we want pieces of. So it's not crazy to start Chark over the Steelers wide receivers. I think he's in that range.
I would start Chark over George Pickens because it still feels odd to say it, but Detroit is a much better offense than Pittsburgh right now. So I think that makes Chark a better play than George Pickens.
Yep, for sure.
On the Vikings side, we'll start on the injury report there as well, because illness could be a factor. We had 5 Vikings miss practice Wednesday with illness. ESPN's Kevin Seifert said there were no positive COVID tests among them. So don't know exactly what the illness is. We'll watch them throughout the week, but the group did include on defense, Danielle Hunter, Harrison Smith, Patrick Peterson. So if any of those guys miss the game, that would only help the matchup in the favor of Detroit's offense. Kirk Cousins, you talked about him as a streamer option earlier, and I agree that he is an option. He probably seems like he's a better option than he really is, though. If you look at the season-long matchup numbers, it still looks like Detroit is a great matchup for quarterbacks, but over the past 5 weeks, the Lions actually rank 3rd in Football Outsiders pass defense DVOA. Now, I'm not saying sit your passing game pieces against the Lions, but I do think that it should make you rethink Cousins, who has not been very good lately. He had the huge game against the Patriots, 3 much poorer outings surrounding that. Like even the big 357-yard game against the Bills, he threw 2 picks in that one, took 4 sacks. So it was one of those games where he got there on volume primarily.
Yeah, Cousins hasn't been good all year. I think we've been saying that. I think the Patriots game was like his only impressive performance of the season. But the Lions at 3rd in pass defense DVOA is crazy. The amount of swings you can get and stuff like that. And I don't believe they're the 3rd best pass defense in the NFL. I think they're definitely improved from where they were early. We should probably treat them as, a neutral matchup. I think the reasons Cousins is a good play this week, it's really just the game environment, right? Like this game easily has the highest over-under on the week. The Vikings do have a 25.25 point implied total. That's 9th highest on the week. So I do prefer Goff in this game, but I do think Cousins is a decent play too.
Yes, I'll agree with him being a decent play. Also worth mentioning before we finish, Vikings 24th in pass offense DVOA over the past 5 weeks, Detroit 9th. So like every time I say Jared Goff over Kirk Cousins, I still chuckle a little bit, but like all of the indicators point to him being a safer and better play.
Yeah, the Lions do deserve to be favored in this game, despite what their records would tell you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on that one?
Nope.
Cleveland at Cincinnati, Bengals by 6, over under 47. I think we all overtrusted Deshaun Watson last week. I'm going to lean toward under trusting him this week. I don't want to say that was a mistake, dump him, because, it was his first game in 2 years, could quickly turn it around. But I also don't want to trust my week 14 lineup to Watson if I can help it. Like I'm probably playing most of the other quarterbacks that we've talked about to this point over Watson in this particular game.
Yeah, I think we said he had a wide range of outcomes, and he just basically hit like the very bottom of that range. And he was bad. PFF had him as the 5th worst quarterback on the week in their passing grades. Just missed a ton of throws low. It's like spiking throws into the dirt. It was weird to see. But again, not totally surprising. I'm with you. I would not drop him because I wouldn't be surprised if, any one of these next few weeks, things just kind of click for him and he's closer to old Deshaun Watson. But I definitely would not start him this week. That performance came against the Texans, who are, not a good defense. And the Bengals haven't been great lately, but I still think this is a tougher matchup for Watson than last week.
Yeah, and I would think that performance, if anything, would make Cleveland lean even further toward the run this week than they already like to do. I think Amari Cooper's fine. Otherwise, I would prefer to not start anybody besides Nick Chubb from this offense. Donovan Peoples-Jones is kind of in that wide receiver 4 range where we've talked about some other guys, maybe low wide receiver 3, but his low volume, general ways plus Watson's play last week would have me leaning away from him.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Cooper got 41% of the Browns targets last week. And he had a big game against the Bengals back in week 8, 135 yards in the score. So he's not like a comfortable play after what we saw last week, but I think in most cases you're starting Amari Cooper. David Njoku back to a limited practice on Wednesday. So, between the injury and Watson's play, I would not want to use Njoku this week, but, at least he might be an option for us in week 15.
I mean, if he's all the way back by Sunday, I'm playing him over guys like the Titans and Daniel Bellinger and Foster Moreau.
Yes, I'm with you there. Would like to see a full practice out of him, but we'll see how the week goes. But yeah, if he's active, I probably would play him over those types.
On to the Bengals, who got a full practice from Joe Mixon on Wednesday, so he should be ready to return from his concussion. And I think the question, more so than if you're playing Mixon, is did Samaje Perine do enough over the past 2 weeks to make him a standalone play, even with Mixon back? What do you think?
I would guess no, but I would say we'll see, and I would not risk it on using Perine this week. Like if you have Perine and he ends up getting 12 touches, then you say, okay, maybe he's an option for me going forward. But I think it's possible that he just goes back to his old role, playing on some passing downs.
I agree. I mean, Samaje Perine has been with Cincinnati since 2019, so they know him as a player. They weren't surprised by him the past 2 weeks. Fantasy owners might have been, but shouldn't have been, because he was stepping into a role that has made Joe Mixon a good fantasy option even when he's been inefficient. So yep. I agree. I would not play Perine this week if I can help it. I would also try not to drop him because, we've seen what he can be as an injury replacement, and we'll see if they do give him the ball a little bit more going forward. Tyler Boyd with Jamar Chase back last week still ran a route on 90% of dropbacks, and Hayden Hurst is now doubtful with his injury from last week. So there's room inside for Tyler Boyd right now.
Freaking Boyd. I had him in a lot of DFS lineups, and 4 for 60 with a 20-yard touchdown drop. I mean, the Hurst thing, it's, Mitchell Wilcox is his replacement. Hurst being out is just going to feed more targets to the wide receivers. So you're obviously starting Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and I think Boyd's still a decent wide receiver 3. I don't like him as much as I did last week just because this game environment's not as good. But I do think he's a decent target bet.
I tried to tell you not to like him so much last week.
Should have told me he was going to drop that touchdown.
that was so bad.
Yeah, it was horrible.
That was Will Fuller stuff. Houston at Dallas, Cowboys by 16.5, over under 45.5. Jared, have you caught the fever? Because Davis Mills is back for this game.
I don't know who he's going to be throwing to, because it sounds like Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins missed practice again today. This game is just, you don't see 17-point spreads in the NFL very often.
Yeah, I'm not sure that Houston's capable of scoring enough points to cover that 16.5 point spread for this game. That's ugly. Nico Collins, like you mentioned, is probably out. So the only player really worth talking about is Dameon Pierce, and I'm going to try not to use him this week. So we got a rebound to some degree last week, 18 carries, 73 yards, which is a solid day in general, but you also have to put it in the context of him playing one of the worst run defenses in the entire league. So now they're playing what should be a better offense this week. Dallas, just blew out Indy. I think we're all expecting another blowout here. And I think that anybody can wrap their head around the Dameon Pierce likely not being a ceiling play this week. So I think maybe the hurdle is realizing that it's not actually scary to sit him for this one. He's had 5 games without a touchdown of any sort. He's had 7 straight games without a rushing touchdown. So even if Pierce comes out and has a fine game, even if they carry it 20 times and he averages 4 yards per carry, an 80-yard game with no touchdowns is not going to, make or break your fantasy week. Sure, maybe he outscores your 5-point running back that you play in his place, but we're not sitting a ceiling guy here. Don't be scared to sit Dameon Pierce this week.
Yeah, he's had one ceiling game all season. I mean, he's been a floor play, and I don't think there's a great floor in this matchup. I think, last week, like you said, good matchup against the Browns, and that game. I mean, the Texans had the lead until late in the second quarter of that game. So, they were able to stick with Dameon Pierce. This could definitely be more like what we saw in weeks 11 and 12, where, the Texans lost pretty handily and Pierce had, just 10 or so touches. So now, all that being said, he's like RB 20 in our rankings because the position sucks so much. But yeah, he's definitely not a must start.
I would probably play either of the Dolphins running backs over him. I would play Rachaad White over him, and I would play whoever is the Panthers starting running back over him.
Yeah, and I don't think those are crazy.
All right. On the Dallas side, play everybody. I mean, they're just going to do whatever they want in this game.
Yep. Yes, sure. I will. So this is, I mean, we've talked about the Texans defense before and how, they don't really give up points to the passing game because teams run on them so much. I was looking into the quarterback finishes against Houston. Only 2 of 12 quarterbacks to face Houston have finished better than quarterback 14. I still think Dak's a good play. The Cowboys have a 31-point implied total. Like, you'd have to get super unlucky for all those touchdowns to go to the running backs. But just interesting, the Texans' run D has been so bad and their offense so bad that, teams just haven't had to do a lot passing. But I do still think Dak's a nice play. CeeDee Lamb's a must start, and, Schultz is close to a must start at tight end just because the position's so bad.
Yeah, I mean, don't be surprised if this week goes like last week for Dak, where he throws 30 passes, he throws for 170 yards, 3 touchdowns. He finished QB 15. So I don't think that this is a week to play Dak in DFS, but it's also not a week where I'm looking for a replacement in my redraft lineup.
Yeah, agreed.
KC at Denver, Chiefs by 9.5 for this one, over under 43.5, thanks to the Chiefs being involved. Kansas City has been leaning run lately, though, and I say, relative to where they started the season, not among the run heavier teams in the league. Last week, though, their second most run heavy outing of the season against the Bengals, still about 60-40 in favor of the pass. Through week 9, though, the Chiefs were going 71.4% pass. Over the past 4 games, that's down to 64%. Broncos opponents are passing under expected for the season and even further under expected over the past 4 weeks. The Denver defense has been down versus the pass lately, but still better overall in that range than they are versus the run. So I really like Isaiah Pacheco's upside this week in a game situation that I just expect to feed into any desire the Chiefs have to use him. They've shown at least a solid desire to give him the ball lately.
Yeah, so to put it in perspective, the Chiefs are still 4th in pass rate over expected over the past 4 weeks, where they were first, and it's definitely down. It's down from plus 14% to plus 7%. So they are running more. They're still a pass leaning offense. You mentioned the Denver defense stuff. So Football Outsiders DVOA over the past 5 weeks, 29th against the pass, 8th against the run. So this is like totally flipped to being what looks like a pass funnel defense. The Chiefs will be able to do whatever they want in this game. I think all your passing game pieces are fine. I still think Juju Smith-Schuster is fine. He got back to full playing time last week. He didn't produce in the box score, but the playing time was there. So I still think he is a fine star. And then I do think Pacheco's a fine star. I think, in this game, he should be able to get 15 plus touches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think he starts out as like a mid to low RB2. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if he tops 20 carries in this game and puts up some real good numbers. I agree. Juju Smith-Schuster is the guy to play among wide receivers. The next Chiefs wideout for us is Marquez Valdez-Scantling at wide receiver 44.
Yeah, I even think Jerick McKinnon's in play in PPR this week. He's 31st in our PPR running back rankings, which, is higher than I'd like him, but that's what we're left with at this point. He's averaging 3.6 carries, but 5 targets over his last 5 games. He's actually 32nd among running backs in expected fantasy points over that span. So, if you need an option in PPR, he's okay.
And is still in the picture near the goal line, which is key.
Yeah. Yep.
On the Broncos side, Jared, did you know that Russell Wilson has posted the 3rd highest Pro Football Focus passing grade Actually, he posted the third highest of week 13. It was his best of the season. He's 6th in passing grade over the past 3 weeks among QBs with multiple games in that time. It translated to 1 touchdown and QB 28 in fantasy points.
Yeah, I can't say I watched much of that 10-9 Ravens win over the Broncos. I mean, Russ only threw it 22 times, so maybe that's how he comes away with a decent PFF grade. Just don't let him actually do anything. You're not trusting Russ, obviously. I think Jerry Jeudy is a fine play this week. It looks like Courtland Sutton's not going to play. Now, Jeudy was limited in playing time last week coming off that ankle injury. He actually ran her out on just 41% of the dropback. So that's not good, but I would expect him to be closer to full time now in his second week off the injury. And he did still see 4 targets on his 11 pass routes last week. So, his target rate's been pretty strong all season. And if he gets back to full playing time and there's no Courtland Sutton, I think Jeudy is a good enough volume bet to be in play this week.
I agree. By the way, Mike White has 16 more fantasy points in 2 games than Russell Wilson has over those past 3.
Nice.
Brandon McManus was out with a quad injury on Wednesday. The team says it's not concerned. It's not bringing in another kicker, so apparently we should expect him to be back. He's coming off some good production, so I guess you can wait and see on your kicker if Brandon McManus has been your guy lately.
Greg Dulcich finally came through for us last week.
I don't know if it's called coming through if it's so bad to the point that you stop using him and then he produces.
Well, honestly, though, he's a good example of why we look at route rates, right? If a guy is out there on that many pass plays, he's going to produce eventually. Now it's going to be up and down because this offense is so bad. But, again, with Courtland Sutton out, that helps Greg Dulcich too. So, he is 8th in our tight end rankings this week.
Yep, should be fine. The most significant place I had him, though, was a team that also has Pat Freiermuth, so I have since dropped Dulcich, and I'm done with him.
Fair enough.
Anything else from that game?
Nope.
Tampa Bay at San Francisco, 49ers by 3.5, at least last time I looked, even though Brock Purdy is the starting quarterback. Over under of 37. This game got moved out of prime time, which probably bothers Tom Brady. I don't think he would ever admit it, but you got to think that him getting flexed out of prime time is annoying, although maybe it helps Sleepy Tom, as we've talked about over the past few years.
That's right. Yeah. But with Brady there's no reason to like him as a quarterback 1 this week. For starters, he has only 3 top 12 finishes all season. And then he gets this 49ers defense first in pass defense DVOA over the past 5 weeks. They're 5th in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks on the season. And the Bucs have the 2nd lowest implied total of the week. Only the Texans have a lower implied total than Tampa.
Yeah. The late comeback Monday night, it can make it easier to forget, but the pass offense still stunk for most of that game. He's wound up with 2 touchdown passes in 3 straight games, but it hasn't done a whole lot otherwise. 49ers, as you mentioned, have been good in pass defense. They've been good in overall defense. Even last week when Tua wound up with 2 touchdowns at the end, he posted his worst full game passer rating of the season. So not a good matchup for a quarterback that has not been running particularly well. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, fine, but I think it's not a high ceiling week for them.
It's not. I do think Godwin is pretty clearly ahead at this point. He has 11 targets per game over his last 5. So the volume is keeping him afloat. Evans is allergic to the end zone all of a sudden, which is crazy to see. I do think Evans is still a decent wide receiver too, though.
Cade Otton outscored all other tight ends in fantasy last week, but
did he really?
He did. He ended up first in PPR because he caught 6 balls for 28 yards. So it's important to remember, though, that followed a week of 0 targets when Cameron Brate was around. Cameron Brate should be back this week. He missed Monday's game with an illness. We also saw just 3 targets against a bad Seattle tight end defense the game before that. So I think it's more likely that Cade Otton is not helping you than that he is.
Yeah, he's not in play if Brate is back, and Brate was a full go on Wednesday. Plus, this Niners tight end defense is really good, so I would not want to be messing with either of those guys. And then the backfield, so we had Fournette kind of play slightly ahead of Rachaad White in Fournette's first game back. Fournette had 10 carries, 7 targets. Rachaad White 9 carries, 8 targets. So they're close in value. The matchup is tough, which hurts both guys. I think they're both low end RB2 plays this week. If you're picking between the two, that would be Fournette for me.
Yeah, I would have to lean that way as well. On the San Francisco side, we've got Brock Purdy making his first NFL start, and Andy Dalton actually posted the best PFF passing grade of week 13. So, maybe there's some room for Brock Purdy to do something here. I think we're talking about 2 quarterback and super flex leagues, but we'll see. Bucs safeties Antoine Winfield Jr., Mike Edwards both missed that game, both still not practicing Wednesday. So that would certainly help the matchup. I think really we're looking at Purdy, though, through the scope of what his impact is on San Francisco's pass catchers. And to me, I would expect him to be better for Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel on the target front than Brandon Ayuk. Here are the season average target depths for these San Francisco pass catchers. According to Pro Football Reference, Ayuk 9.3, George Kittle 6.0, Deebo 4.6, McCaffrey 2.2.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. And we even saw that last week when Purdy came in. He threw 37 passes, 10 went to Deebo, 9 went to McCaffrey, 7 went to Brandon Ayuk. McCaffrey and Deebo just run the higher percentage routes. I'm also curious. I think you're going to see the Niners lean a bit more on the run with Purdy under center. I think McCaffrey is going to be a volume monster now with Purdy under center. I wonder too if Deebo Samuel starts mixing in for more carries with Purdy under center. So I think McCaffrey, you're obviously starting. I think Deebo is still fine. I think Ayuk takes the biggest hit. I think he's like a wide receiver 3 now, probably still starting him in a lot of cases this week with all the teams on bye. But we'll see how it goes. I think Purdy was a good college quarterback, and I think he could be like a good NFL backup. But really, you're just betting on the Shanahan. I mean, we've seen these backups put up nice numbers in Shanahan's offense, and there's enough weapons where I think the offense could be okay. I think Purdy himself is only an option in 2 quarterback super flex leagues, but I think he can be good enough to keep these other guys afloat.
Yeah, what we've seen is that any quarterback who's playing for Kyle Shanahan does better than he probably should in yards per attempt.
Yes, for sure.
George Kittle, I've seen that there's some worry about him blocking more with the switch at quarterback, but he ran a route on 94% of dropbacks last week. And this Bucs defense has absolutely nothing scary in the pass rush. The only 2 players on the Bucs defense with more than 3.5 sacks or 7 total quarterback hits through 12 games this year is D tackle Vita Vea and middle linebacker Devin White. So if there's any threat in the pass rush, it's coming up the middle, which George Kittle is not going to help a whole lot.
Yeah, Kittle's routes have been elite all season. He's not getting targets, just 4 targets per game over his last 5, 12% target share. I don't know, maybe he benefits slightly too with Purdy if Kittle running short. Did you have the A dots on Kittle versus the wide receivers? I might have 2.
Yeah, his is 6.0.
Okay, which is what, about the same as Deebo's and lower than Ayuk?
It's closer. It's a yard, 1.4 ahead of Deebo, 3.3 short of Ayuk. So he's closer to that shorter range than Ayuk.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's still tough to bench Kittle because the upside he's shown in the past, and again, tight end is so crappy. But I'm definitely concerned about Kittle. I definitely don't think he's a top 3 tight end going forward.
Oh, I agree with that, but it's going to be tough to drop him past like 7 or 8.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Anything else from that game?
No.
Carolina at Seattle. Seahawks by 3.5 somehow. It opened at 7 and changed to that, according to Vegas Insider. Over under 44. I know I already went and bet Seattle as soon as you pointed out the line, and I went and bet more than I usually do on a single game because I feel pretty good about Seattle covering in this one.
Yeah, me too. I was surprised by that line, which always makes me nervous when I think a line doesn't make sense. I think, as you've been pointing out this week, I think it's theoretically a good matchup for Carolina because the Seahawks run D has been so bad, and that's what Carolina wants to do. So, if they can keep this game close and get Donta Foreman, assuming he plays, which is the other issue here, he's dealing with a foot injury. If they can get him to 20 carries, I think they could be able to keep this game close. But I'm with you on Seahawks minus 3.5.
Yeah, I mean, if it was 5, I'd be like, okay, I'm good there. But I feel like Seattle has a pretty good shot of winning this game by at least 4. I do think that Carolina will run plenty because, I mean, Seattle hasn't given us any reason to believe lately that it's going to blow anybody out. They needed a last-second touchdown to beat the Rams with John Wolford last week. So I suppose I get it. Whoever is starting in the backfield for Carolina, D'Onta Foreman's the first guy. We'll have to watch that foot injury, missed practice Wednesday. So we'll see about Thursday and Friday. But if he's out, I think Chuba Hubbard becomes a sneaky play this week because Seattle's defense overall, it's 29th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running back. So a terrific matchup overall. And, like we said, last week, they gave up the 2 touchdowns to Cam Akers. Even if we take out that Raiders game, Seattle has allowed the 9th most PPR points to the position per game for the season.
Yeah, definitely good matchup for the running game. Foreman said yesterday, he said 95% chance he's playing on Sunday. So I think you can pencil him in for now. We'll see what he does over the next couple of days. I just, you like him more than I do this week. I think he's a fine RB2. You just have to realize the range of outcomes is massive, which is what we've seen from him even over these past 5 games. He has 2 top 10 half PPR finishes. He also has 2 games outside the top 40. He's just a game script dependent back. He has 8 total targets over his last 6 games since the McCaffrey trade. So, if the Panthers fall behind in this game, he's gonna kind of get scripted out. It's also worth noting too, in Carolina's last game, it was only like a 60-40 split with Foreman and Chuba Hubbard. I know Foreman did leave that game for a bit with the foot issue, but they were working in Hubbard a bit more than they had been previously.
Yeah, 5 starts have gone 26 carries in that overtime loss to the Falcons, 7 in a blowout loss to the Bengals, 31 in a 10-point win over the Falcons, 11 in a loss to Baltimore, and then 24 last week in what ended up being, not last week, last time out, in what ended up being a 13-point win over Denver. So I don't expect this game to get to blowout proportions. Is it possible? Yeah, it's certainly possible that they get blown out, but I'm balancing that with a very soft run defense and an offense that really wants to run the ball. Let me get to the number. 3rd most run heavy offense by pass rate over expected over the past 4 weeks, which of course is included in that 5-game starter run for Foreman. So I think overall he's a very good bet for carries. And I think within that, very good bet for production in those carries.
Yeah, I think he could finish the week as an RB1. I think he could finish the week as like a low end RB3.
Seattle's running backs could be ugly. We had no practice for Kenneth Walker, no practice for DJ Dallas on Wednesday. Travis Homer even was limited. I'm not playing any of them if Kenneth Walker is not playing.
I'd rather not. I mean, I think some teams are going to have to. So they also they have Tony Jones on the active roster. They signed Wayne Gallman to the practice squad. They also have Darwin Thompson on the practice squad. Remember him? He was the Chiefs, I think, like 7th round pick that a lot of people were kind of excited about. The Seahawks have been leaning heavily towards the pass anyways. And I think if Walker's out, that's going to continue, which is obviously good news for Geno and DK and Lockett. I think those guys are obvious starters. And then we're just going to have to see with their running back, see who's available. But I wouldn't be going out of my way to start any of these guys if Walker's out.
Darwin Thompson was a 6th round pick, by the way. You need to respect him properly.
My bad, Darwin.
Utah
State, right?
Oh, yeah. Travis Homer is sitting 29th in our running back rankings right now. I certainly would not play him any higher than that. I honestly would have a tough time playing him over Michael Carter this week. I think he belongs in the same range with Jerick McKinnon, Kareem Hunt, guys that we're kind of playing because we have to.
Yeah, again, we'll see. If Homer is active and then Dallas and Walker are out, that would obviously help. I do think Gallman could be involved. It's a mess right now. We'll hopefully know more by Saturday.
Of course, even more reason to like Geno Smith and his wide receivers who are easily playing. Noah Fant has been decent lately. Now, Will Dissly, first thing, did not practice Wednesday with a calf injury. His absence would certainly help Noah Fant. Dissly has seen 3 of his 4 smallest snap shares this season among the past 4 games. Noah Fant has played more snaps than Dissly 3 of the past 4 games. He's also had 4 straight games of 3+ catches, which is certainly not big numbers, but no other time this year has Fant seen 3+ catches in more than 2 straight games. So it's a relative upswing for him.
Yeah, Fant is our tight end 11 on the week right now, which, seems crazy. But, 4.5 targets per game over his last 4, which is, again, similar to, like, the projections on the Titans guys and Daniel Bellinger. But, Fant, to me, is still a better player than those guys, and he's in a better offense than those guys. So I would, clearly prefer him. And, again, our Fant projection now has Dissly playing still. If Dissly's out, Fant will climb even higher.
He's a skyrocket. Is going to get, like, another target and, like, 0.6 more catches.
I think he'll be tight end 9. I think he'd pass Hunter Henry and Evan Ingram for me if Dissly's out.
Oh, baby. Miami at the Chargers on Sunday night. Dolphins by 3. It's up from 1.5 for the Dolphins where it opened over under 52.5. So another potentially juicy fantasy matchup. Tua and Jalen Waddle both limited Wednesday with their injuries from last week, but I think we're expecting both to play. We'll obviously watch them to make sure that's the case. Jared, this is the question I got on Tua this week. Tua or Kyler Murray?
Oh, man. It'd be tough to bench too, but I do have concerns. I mean, for one, he played his worst game of the season last week, just missed a ton of throws, which he hadn't been doing all year. I think he's going to bounce back, but he's still probably going to be missing both his tackles in this game. Austin Jackson, the right tackle, was placed on IR, so he's definitely out. Teron Armstead didn't practice Wednesday, so he might miss again. The Chargers pass rush is not nearly as good as the Niners, so that helps Tua, but he has this ankle thing. Waddle is banged up. Like we'll see what happens with him over the rest of the week, but he was clearly hobbled in the second half of that Niners game, so I don't know if he's going to be a full go. Plus, just in this Chargers matchup, we've seen teams go run heavy against them, and Miami has shown the willingness to lean that way when the matchup dictates it. So you might not get the volume you have been getting from Tua. Now he could have a massive game because of these wide receivers and just the offensive scheme. So I don't know. Murray's higher in our rankings right now, right?
Well, yeah,
I guess I would trust that. But again, I think we'll see. I think Waddle's the big thing for me with Tua. Like if we think he's a full go, I would probably bump Tua up ahead of Kyler.
I hope he's a full go then, because Kyler just makes me feel nauseous at this point, betting on him over anybody with upside. We'll get to that game next, but yeah, we'll watch Jalen Waddle's status here. You mentioned it being a favorable matchup for running the ball. Of course, just before this matchup, we got Miami's offense giving us reason to not know which running back to trust. We had been watching Jeff Wilson lead things. He had the disappointing outing against, what was it, Detroit the week before?
Houston, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Houston. And then we had Raheem Mostert come back, like all the way back from injury last week, start the game. Of course, it was a bad game for the entire running game, so it's not like anybody showed out and earned anything. But, the last time we watched them play, which was last week, was Raheem Mostert working clearly ahead of Jeff Wilson Jr. in limited game for both of them. So it's like a Rashad White, Leonard Fournette situation right now, where my lean, if I'm choosing between them, is toward the guy who worked first last time out, but I absolutely can't say for sure that it's Raheem Mostert over Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, I think if you were doing one of those like blind resume things that they do, for like the college basketball tournament, and you had like Jeff Wilson, so Jeff Wilson, his first game with the Fins, it was immediately a 50-50 split. Then in game 2, Wilson took the lead. And then in this third game together, it was back to Mostert. I don't know. I would still lean Wilson. I think, one, we obviously don't know. 2, I think either way, it's probably going to be like 60-40 in one direction or the other. And again, in this matchup, where I think Miami could run more than usual and they should be efficient running the ball, I think both Wilson and Mostert are solid plays. One of them will probably have, like a top 15-ish week, whoever, gets more of the work. But I think even the other guy, could be like a, borderline RB2 type of guy this week.
I think it's quite possible that both of these guys score in this game. So, let's hope that most people listening just have one or the other and aren't choosing between them. It's really a coin flip, though, if you are choosing between the two players.
Agreed.
Anybody else from the Dolphins side?
Nope.
On the Chargers side, it's a pass favoring matchup. It's an upside spot for Justin Herbert. Was a little bit disappointing against the Raiders last week. Did still manage a QB8 finish, 335 yards, 1 touchdown, took 5 sacks. So the protection has not been an issue for most of the year, but it looks like an issue right now, at least in part because they're very pass heavy. So it makes it easier for the defense to know what's happening and attack in that area.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing working in Herbert's favor. I was super disappointed by how he played and even produced last week, considering the matchup. It's another fine matchup here. I mean, not as good as last week's was, but the game, as you said, has the high over under. The Chargers have a pretty nice implied total. Well, again, on this side, we'll have to see about the injuries. Mike Williams being the big one. I think he was limited in Wednesday's practice, so he has a chance to return from this game. On the O-line too, Herbert was missing his center and one of his tackles, one of his backup tackles last week because they've had so many injuries at that spot. So we'll see if he gets those guys back. Corey Linsley, the center, was limited in Wednesday's practice, so I think he has a chance to return. That would obviously be good news for Herbert.
Mike Williams was limited Wednesday, so we'll see about him. First time since week 11 when he returned for 6 snaps against the Chiefs. Now, we're going to have to watch him closely because the last time he returned from that ankle sprain, he said, I feel great. I forget what his percentage was. It was like 200% or something like that. He was around for 6 snaps, and then he was gone again. So, we'll be watching his specific status before deciding where he winds up in the rankings. You can watch and see where he ends up there. That's going to also affect Josh Palmer, of course.
Yeah, there hasn't been a single game this season with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams healthy. throughout the game. So we haven't really seen what that's going to mean for Palmer. With Williams, I would try not to use him, in his first game coming back from aggravating a high ankle sprain, which are already tough injuries to return from. We saw the risk in his last game when he only made it through what you said 6 snaps. There's upside there, but I would, if you have other viable options, I would keep Williams on the bench this week.
Donald Parham might be back as well. Designated Wednesday to return from IR, been out with a hamstring injury. So we'll have to see this week if he's going to be ready for that game, but that would potentially knock Gerald Everett's floor at least.
For sure. Yeah. Everett's been tough all season. I mean, their route rates just haven't been where we want them. They've, been in the 60s for the most part. He has had games where he's seen nice volume, including last week, 6 targets, caught 5 of them for 80 yards. And the matchup's good against Miami, 28th in adjusted points allowed to tight end. So I think, Everett's in play, but he has a wide range of outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else from that game?
Nope.
New England at Arizona to close it out on Monday night. Patriots by 1.5 on the road in this one, over under 44.5. And so here we've got the Cardinals, who I've been ragging on for most of the season. They're home dogs in prime time against a 6-6 Patriots team that just finished losing by 14 points at home. It's gone under 300 total yards in 5 of the past 6 games. We got them 1.5 point favorites against this team. That's what makes it hard to bet on anything Arizona. The New England side first, though. We're going to see about Damian Harris. Opened this week not practicing, missed the last game against the Bills with the thigh injury. Obviously, Ramondre Stevenson is in starter territory either way. Certainly his upside's higher if Harris is out.
Yeah, we were arguing whether Stevenson should be number 1 or number 4 among running backs. So, obviously if you have Ramondre Stevenson, you're starting him. He played 98% of the snaps in that Bills game. You don't see that out of running backs. And I would expect similar usage if Harris is out.
Yeah, got unlucky by getting 0 carries in the fourth quarter after falling behind by 17. Jacoby Myers, short of his usual playing time against the Bills last time, coming off that Thanksgiving shoulder injury, but it was at least, a step up from his return to that game on Thanksgiving. Should continue to improve with the long week. He's not a great play, but he's a fine play in this one. And there is upside if he does come into this game and get full playing time.
Yes, definitely watch his practice participation. If he gets into full practice or is not listed on the injury report on Saturday, I'd feel fine about using him as a wide receiver 3.
Nothing about the Patriots matchup scares me about Kyler Murray, but we do at least have, very experienced defensive coaches on the New England side, where I wouldn't be surprised if they limit what Kyler Murray does, if they limit the receiving in this game, just if they cap things. And that's what scares me about playing Kyler over Tua, who we've seen the ceiling with him and his receivers this year.
Yeah, I mean, the low implied total that you mentioned for Arizona, is the knock against Kyler for me, just 20.75 points. They've had low totals for most of the season, though, deservedly so. But Kyler, his last 3 outings, quarterback 3, quarterback 6, quarterback 4. He has DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown now. Elsewhere, it looks like Rondale Moore is going to miss this game. I mean, we'll see. It's still, a few days away, but it looks like Moore is going to be out and Dortch is going to play, which, helps Murray at least a little bit. And I think it does make Dortch an okay PPR option. He'd been getting good volume, but that, I think, that all that came without DeAndre Hopkins or Marquise Brown, right? I don't think Dortch has a full game with both of those guys. I don't think you're going to get, the 10 target game out of Dortch with Brown and Hopkins healthy, but I do think, 6-7 targets is a reasonable projection for Dortch this week.
Yeah, Kingsbury said earlier this week he hopes to get Moore and Dortch back, but certainly it looks like Dortch is closer. Either of those guys probably reclaims the slot lead, which just, further muddies the picture here. Not only have we not gotten a game with one of those guys and both of the outside guys, we've got one game so far of Hopkins and Brown together, and it was without those 2 slot guys. So Marquise Brown played a lot more in the slot than he normally has this season. 73% of his pass snaps came in the slot in week 12. Before that, he had topped out at 33.3%. So that makes it, even harder to project what the target share is going to be here, because that slot has been a high upside target spot. You mentioned it with Dortch. It's been the same with Rondale Moore. The guy in the slot has gotten the ball a lot this year. So I don't know what to say about Hopkins versus Marquise Brown in terms of target share if both guys are outside this week.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're still finding that out. I think both guys are like mid-range wide receiver 2s, pretty. They're still both good volume bets.
Yeah, it's a solid spot for both. It's not a scary
Yeah.
matchup at this point. So I agree that both are fine plays. And when you're weighing the two against each other, it's funny. It's something you have to do for projections, obviously, but it's ultimately something that there aren't going to be very many fantasy rosters that are making that decision, which guy, this guy or that guy.
Yeah, I think if you're starting both guys, you're in fine shape. They're both in the top 18 in our wide receiver rankings this week. Can I close the show with one more uncomfortable tight end play?
Oh God, don't tell me to play Trey McBride.
No, it's not Trey McBride. It's Hunter Henry on the other side.
Ooh.
The targets haven't been strong for Henry. Just 11 targets in the 3 games since the bye week. But he has 76, 74, and 78% of the routes. His route rates had been sort of going up and down all season prior to the bye, but it's been consistent in the 3 games since. And this is a really good matchup for Henry against the Cardinals, 31st in adjusted points allowed to tight ends. Football Outsider says them 30th in tight end coverage. So Henry, actually, I like better than the Titans guys and Bellinger. I think I like Fant a bit better than Henry. But those 2 guys, I think, are the 2 best guys on the waiver wire that you might be able to pick up this week and use.
I agree with all of that. And even though it's only been 11 targets over the 3 games, that has included 2 straight of 5 targets. So, both of those were high volume passing games for Mac Jones, but maybe we get another one of those in this one against an Arizona defense that has not been too tough against the pass.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week 14 preview edition of the podcast. Make sure that if you're not playing out redraft teams, you go ahead and play some pick'ems this week or some over-unders, do some daily drafting on either Sleeper or Underdog. You can find links to get your initial deposit matched at the bottom of this podcast, either or both site. I'm playing on both of them at this point, even though I do have teams still alive. So it's fun stuff to do. And you can check out my free article highlighting the top early plays on the Underdog Pick'em slate on draftsharks.com now. Even if you're not a DS insider, you can go read that. So that's a good way to keep fantasy going, even if you're out of the playoffs or even just to supplement. So for Jared Small and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.